Segment two, Golden Black Live. Coach Matt Painter, and we always appreciate his time. It's hard to believe it's October the 6th, actually, when this airs, and you're already 10 days through practice, but you've been through practice and everything else. It doesn't seem to stop anymore, Coach. Talk a little bit about how practice is going and just that your team is going at it and getting ready for the season.
Yeah, I think the one thing that jumps out, is even though you have a lot of people that return, you do start over.
Yeah.
And you don't want to miss any steps. You don't want to miss any building blocks, teaching points. And, the devil's in the details. You got to be fundamentally sound and you got to work on those things. And you got to work on being together. And obviously, you got to have a great competitive spirit. And we're excited about the season. We like our pieces. I think everybody feels good about the guys that have experience and they understand the program and they understand what it's all about. And obviously we had a lot of success last year. We had a heartbreaking loss to finish the year, and hopefully that we can use that as motivation, along with, adding some key pieces. We think we've added some pieces athletically and competitively that'll really help our team.
I go back to your first year, and you had guys that you loved as players. You weren't very talented. I'm talking about your first year as head coach at Purdue. You're on kind of both ends of the spectrum. Great guys and hard workers that build a foundation for your program, and now you're into it with maybe your most talented team on paper that you've ever had. Just the differences between that. I mean, you talk about the building blocks and what you have to do as a coach. Is it still you got to check those boxes and make sure everything gets dealt with the same way you did with your first team?
Well, my first year as a head coach, on top of the year I was an assistant with Coach Katie, is the worst 2-year period in the history of Purdue basketball when it comes to wins.
Yeah.
And the best 2-year period in the history of Purdue basketball when it comes to wins is the last 2 years.
Yeah.
And so when you have the tough losses that we've had at the end, sometimes that gets lost, but I don't want that lost with our players. I want them to feel good about that because those are great accomplishments. To be number one in the country back-to-back years, to be the first Purdue team to win a regular season championship and a tournament championship. So we did a lot of good things. We were the number one team in the country in free throw disparity. We're the number one team in the country in fewest fouls. We were a great offensive rebounding team. We generated the best shot in the country in an analytics group called Shot Quality, the number one shot. We had the number one offense in the country, efficiency versus top 100 opponents. We had the number 14 defense in the country against top 100 opponents. Now, it was worse against everybody, which makes no sense because it should be harder to play better competition, but we were technically better against better teams. And that's a good thing, I guess, right? But it's also a little puzzling. We have to do a better job, or I have to do a better job, I should say, of having that kind of competitive fear, because a lot of the teams that we play at that low to mid level, you play at home.
Yeah.
Now, when you get on neutral sites or you get on the road and, you have to be able to play at a high level, no matter what. And we just haven't done that in the tournament against lower, level teams, which are good teams, right?
Yeah.
But they still are teams that I think we should have fared better. And as a head coach, that's something you have to face and you have to take responsibility for. And I think that's contagious, and your players will follow that lead, and then you use it as motivation and you become better. And you wish it doesn't happen, but you become better and you work on it. But we're doing a lot of good things. The year before, our defensive numbers weren't very good at all. The year we went to the Sweet 16, and we didn't do anything different, and we went from 83 to 14.
Yeah.
But we played harder and we played more together, and we held each other accountable. And that's where we have to grow defensively. We got to keep growing in that area, and I think we really can. I think we've become a better defensive team, even though we put ourselves in a really good spot last year. I thought Zachary really improved his defense, especially his ball screen defense, his ability to dominate the glass, and just all the attention he garners. So just, building off of that, but also building off the improvement of all of our guys on our front line. I think Caleb, Mason, Trey, I think we have the best front line in the country. I love our guard play. Obviously, Fletch and Braden becoming sophomores. Normally, those guys that get a lot of experience as a freshman, they make those big jumps. We got a lot of experience right there. Brian Waddell is healthy. Ethan Morton has another year underneath his belt of experience. So you can't, have enough of it. And then obviously, a lot of the young guys, Will Berg, Cam Heide, Miles Colvin, we have a lot of guys right in there. And then Lance Jones, I think, is really going to help our team. He gives us quickness. He gives us a defensive weapon, a guy that can guard a point, but also guard a two. And, he was an all defensive team guy for a couple of years in the Missouri Valley for Southern Illinois. So I like our pieces and I like where we are. Kind of comparing it to, you start a foundation, 20 years ago, but you're really piggybacking your foundation off of what was already there, which was very fortunate for me because obviously Coach Katie is one of the best coaches ever. And we've always tried to grow and make changes depending on our personnel, especially offensively.
Yeah.
You want to play to your strengths, but you want to play to your top 2 to 3 guys. So we just got to keep getting better at what we do and, and play better at the end of the year. That just sums it up, right? Like,
Yeah.
we've done some really good things. You got to get there and play better and coach better. And I know some of our misfortunes wasn't because of a lack of effort or guys were doing something silly. We had them prepared. They were prepared. We went out. Sometimes you have those games and, we have to play in those games, even if we miss shots, without turning the basketball over. That's probably the number one schematic thing that I would say in those games. And you shoot a high volume of threes and miss them, well, that's a lot of opportunities to rebound. But if you're going to shoot a high volume of threes and miss them and turn the ball over, that's a recipe for disaster. I don't care who you are. You can't turn the basketball over. I don't care if that's non-conference, conference, NCAA tournament, and you're just helping yourself. I always say that's Purdue beating Purdue. And, we just have to keep dominating the glass and then take care of the ball. And then when you win those possession wars and you got good players, which we do, you're going to be in good spots.
Yeah. Competitive fear is an interesting term and a good one. I think it may pertain to a lot of things you have to deal with as a staff this year. You've got mature guys, at least certainly everything you see from an age standpoint and experience standpoint, but keeping the noise out or keeping the focus on what you need to focus on. Obviously, there's always been a huge focus on the NCAA tournament. It hasn't been the way you wanted it the last 3 years, maybe, but how have you as a coach kind of figured that out and said, this is how we're going to deal with some of that noise that's out there and some of that feeling of, hey, they don't do anything until they get the NCAA tournament. None of the rest of this stuff matters. How do you address that if you do it all?
Yeah, well, you don't address noise. Successful people don't go on Twitter and dog up successful people when they fail.
Yeah.
It's people that don't do it or people that really that aren't a part of it. They don't understand that piece of it. But it's still out there. And that's something, it's like poison underneath your sink.
Yeah.
It can stay there and it won't bother anybody if it just stays there. But if you pick it up and drink it, it will. So I think it's focusing on the things that we have done so well and keep it there. And, Tony Dungy always talks about being better at what we do. And I think that's a big piece for us. We got to be better at what we do, but we also got to, embrace some things. And, that to me, it starts with turnovers when you get to basketball.
Yeah.
That's always been the big thing for me is, handle the glass, take care of the basketball. And it's profound, right? Every coach in America should say that. But that's what it comes down to. Don't get away. The game hasn't changed. And now when you get into those same situations, that's where you scrap. That's where you scrap and you play hard and you keep the possessions. When you keep the possessions, you're always going to have opportunity, even when you're missing shots. Now, obviously, when you're making shots, that helps out a lot. So we just got to keep working on the offensive end and keep working defensively and keep getting better at what we do. It's not something that we've discussed a lot, but it is things that we've talked about in some of our seminars and some of our group talks about it. Is like, let's use this as motivation, but let's get better at some things that we struggled at too.
Yeah. Coach, when you have, it's not a situation, at least from my untrained eye, maybe of needing too many basketballs, but you do need more time. In other words, you're not going to have with at least the appearance of your roster, you're never going to have enough time for all the, you could play Mason Gillis 40 minutes. You're not going to be able to necessarily do that. And some guys may not play as much as they did last year. How do you deal with that? I mean, it still is it's based on the guys getting the job done on the court and whatever measure that you use to measure that. But that still is a challenge as a coach as you continue to move through this year. You've got a lot of pieces, like you keep saying.
Yeah, it's a great challenge because we have a deep team. We have a good team. And so that's what you want as a coach. You want to have options, and we have those options. And so, it's always when the guy doesn't play, it bothers. And sometimes they've done nothing wrong. And that's hard to swallow because normally you take it as like, what did I do wrong? When in reality, someone else is just playing more. So when you go back and you kind of look at different things and you have 7 to 8 guys you feel good about, that's easy. But when you have a full team you feel good about, now the competition's got to sort it out. And sometimes that competition ends up being pretty equal. And that's where, as a coach, you have to be able to, Zach is a big piece of what we do, obviously, consensus National Player of the Year. And that's one of the things that I always talk about when you have guys that are really good players that draw a lot of attention, where's our value as a team with people that coexist with him, right? Yeah. So it's not just, okay, this guy's better than that guy. It kind of gets to, especially on the offensive end, like who's the best guy to play with him? Like who throws the ball inside to him? Like, who's the 4 that stretches the defense, or who's a 4 that can post up, or who's the 4 that can guard the best, right? That might be 3 different answers for me right there. And so like when you look at it, that's a hell of a problem. That's a good problem for me to have. And I'm glad I have it. I think our staff has done a great job. Our players have worked really hard. I think we're really motivated. And it's a long season though, and you got to keep that in perspective. But you get foul trouble, you get injuries, a lot of things happen, and you're going to need everybody. And that's what we have to do. Like no matter what, even if some guys have started before or played major minutes, if they don't start or it plays less, we got to have a great attitude, and we got to stay there. And you just stay ready as a player. If you got to get ready, it's probably too late. You just stay ready. And if you're playing 15 minutes, 15 is not the lowest number. You got to understand that. If you're going to get mad at 15, it can be 10. You got to be at 15, and there's nothing wrong with not liking it, but you got to keep that clear head. So now when you get more of a chance, you make the most of it. So, you can help yourself and help our team. And what's cool about it is we got a lot of really good guys, and I know they'll pull for each other. And that's what you need, because it's going to be, different guys each night stepping up to help us win.
All right, you have that. You talk about that long season, really an impressive schedule. Maybe that's also you're obviously walk in as probably a consensus top 5 team coming into the season. But you go to Hawaii, not to Maui, but certainly to Honolulu, but Toronto, Arkansas. Talk about that, and just that you've had some difficult schedules, but this is a challenging non-conference schedule to say the least. But maybe what this team really needs.
Yeah, it's probably our toughest schedule we've had, at Purdue since I've been here. We'll see. It still has to unfold right, but on paper, playing Alabama and Toronto, get Zach back in Toronto, to play Xavier here at home, and then play Arizona and Indianapolis to go along with the Honolulu trip and all the teams that are going to be there. We'll definitely play Gonzaga, then either Tennessee or Syracuse. Then obviously having the chance to play teams like Marquette, UCLA, Kansas, like that's, something for us that, that's what you want. And I thought last year, our ability to win those 4 games straight, the Marquette game, which they really outplayed us for the first 30 minutes of the game. And then we really played well that last 10 minutes to close it out. And Braden had a great game. And then to be able to beat, West Virginia, Gonzaga, and Duke, that was huge for us. We weren't ranked, and we ran up to number 5 in the polls at that time. And so we just kind of use that as a springboard, and that's what you want. And even if you have some losses in that fray that we mentioned, just keep going and keep learning and keep getting better. And that's what you want. You want to have tough schedules, and we've been, very fortunate to play tough schedules and still be undefeated. Non-conference the last 2 years, the only high major team in the country. And, we want to keep playing, tough schedules and getting ourselves prepared for the Big Ten and the NCAA tournament.
And I remember watching you, I think I know, interview right after the wonderful world of conference alignment and Washington and Oregon joining the fray.
Right.
Any more thoughts? I mean, that's next year's problem, I understand, but just in terms of, you're a big picture guy and a guy that really deals with a lot of big picture issues facing college basketball. What's your now a couple months into it? How do you still see travel partners as part of the deal? How does that?
It'll be interesting. It really will. I would think travel partners would come into play.
Yeah,
but I'm not sure. We could stay at 20 games. We could grow to 21 or 22. Just kind of looking at kind of breaking the bank a little bit in terms of how many teams you have and what you're trying to do, how many teams you're trying to get in, like what's realistic. Like right now when we're at 14, like we're trying to get in 10, right? 11, that's kind of pushing the envelope. Like, are we going to be able to get in 12 or 13 or 14? Like what does that look like? You know what I mean? So we're just trying to craft our conference schedule and our non-conference schedules and be smart about it and try to get as many teams as we can in there, from the Big Ten Conference. So I know we're a year away from that, but they're going to have to travel a lot more than us, going west to east, and we go east to west, and maybe we can put some things in there that can soften that a little bit for all parties, but especially them. Like when you get new partners, like you have to embrace and help them. This is different. This isn't your dad's Big Ten.
Yeah.
This is a lot different, but it doesn't mean it can't be great, and it doesn't mean it can't be the best. And that's what we're going to strive to do.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting time. All right, a couple last questions. One of the things, I know has been a campaign in the department, John Purdue Club, with Forge and building some things that are really built to keep kids at Purdue and make Purdue the best experience for all student athletes, but also using Chad Brown and that group with Profile Behavior, a group you've used a lot, meaning you take a lot of thought into what pieces work with your program and from a standpoint of personality. Talk about that briefly, just about what that's meant to you and how, not necessarily how it's going to change, but maybe also a positive in terms of retaining the best kids at Purdue in all sports.
Yeah, and I think the thing that we've done a better job of is not necessarily the recruiting piece, but the evaluation piece. Anytime you get hired in a company or a school district or a corporation, things go, you get a background check, you go through HR, like there's a lot of stuff right there. We'll just do the same thing, do a lot of vetting and break things down and figure out not just the individual, but figure out the people around him, figure out what their expectations are. Is education important? Is winning important? Is it only about you? Because there's nothing wrong with having a little bit of that greed and selfishness to where like, hey, like I want to be a big part of this. And there's nothing wrong with that, but it's got to be about winning and you got to be able to sacrifice. And can that person do that? And can the people around that young person do that? Like, so take everything in, Chad Brown does a great job, with Profile and just the DISC assessment and the values assessment and everything that they do. And just trying to help us doesn't necessarily give us answers, but it gives us questions leading to hopefully the answers. Is this guy the right fit for us? And, it's never absolute. It's one tool in the toolbox.
Yeah.
You got to take a lot of different things in, but it's been very beneficial for us. I'd recommend it whether you're, hiring for a new school teacher or a professor, or, somebody in business or the situation and how we do it, in men's basketball.
All right. I always ask you a baseball question this time of year. Your Cubs did not make it.
They did not.
And I don't follow it close enough to even speak very intelligently, but you do follow team sports and understand what it takes to win. My daughter lives in Philly, so I'll become a Phillies fan. Their environment there is fantastic. But what do you see? And I know you aren't living on every pitch. You don't have time to do that. But just in terms of baseball, what do you see? What do you see for October?
Well, like I follow it now, but the Cubs are
Yeah.
out. I don't follow
Yeah.
it.
So now it's over.
I try to watch, but I thought the Cubs had a fabulous season. They,
Yeah.
obviously they put themselves in a great position and they didn't finish like they wanted to. They had a lot of guys get hurt. They had two different guys that started in their rotation end up being their bullpen. They had, injuries in their bullpen. And so like he was moving a lot of pieces around and just trying to make do almost. And they lose their closer at the end of the year and he comes back at the end, and they lost Marcus Stroman. But they had a lot of people step up. They have some really good young talent coming through the system. I mean, some really good, promising players, but they also like, Cody Bellinger was just had a fabulous season for them, and just happy for him because, he, been MVP of the league and then had some tough years. And now the Cubs did I thought a great job in giving him that opportunity. And now whether he's with the Cubs or not, like it really sparked his career. So happy for him. I hope he's with the Cubs because I would like to know about improvements if he's not with them, because I think that's hard to say, especially when it comes to hitting and his ability to play center field and first base at a high level. The middle of their diamond is fabulous. And, with their shortstop and second baseman, Nico Horner had a great year. He's got a chance to get a Gold Glove. But Dansby Swanson coming over for the Braves, and they picked up Candelaria. So I don't know if they'll sign him or re-sign him, but he was with them originally, then obviously left and came back. But he's a good player. They have a young catcher named Amaya. That's really a chance to be a good player. But Yan Gomes had a fabulous season, with that pitching staff, and also, hitting. He had a lot of key hits. I could go on and go through every guy in leagues. And so I watch a lot. And so I put a lot of time into it and watch it. But they, Ian Happ was an all-star 2 years ago. Bellinger was an MVP. Suzuki was as good as anybody the last 2 months of the season. Just had a fabulous season. He's a top 5 hitter in the league the last 2 months of the season. And he's battled some injuries and the adjustment coming over 2 years ago. And so I think he can really break out and be an all-star caliber guy. So if they could re-sign Bellinger and then some of these young guys really be their backups, is the way I look at it. Canaris and Pete Crow Armstrong, maybe Matt Mervis gets another crack at it. They got other guys in there. So what they did with the Javi Baez and the Chris Bryant and the Rizzo trades is really going to benefit them. There's a lot of Cubs fans that got upset about that, and it wasn't a good move. It was a great move, and we all appreciate those guys and everything they did for that organization. But at times when you have to shift, you have to shift. And they did it. The only mistake I thought they made was letting Schwarber go for nothing.
Yeah.
If you could have got something for him, or, they took Jock Peterson for $6 million. I think Schwarber signed with the Nationals for 10 3 years ago, or if that was it. Now that's about the only way I look at it, to where it was like, man, you got to get something for him, get him signed, get something for him, or keep him. I've always loved him. And they had to know through the competition committee or whatever they call their stuff that the DH was rolling and it was coming through, and he just would have been fabulous in Wrigley Field as a DH. Obviously he came up as a catcher and then shifted to the outfield. But no, I'm excited about it. They got to get it figured out with their starting rotation. Obviously Travis Steele had an all-star season, probably a top 5 pitcher in the National League.
Yeah.
So for him, like just building off of that and becoming one of the best pitchers in baseball, reminds me a lot of John Lester, obviously bigger and lefty. And so like going through their starters and some of the stuff, they had some guys come on at the end.
Yeah. Jordan
Jordan Hicks was good. The dude from K-State, he really pitched well. I'm missing another young pitcher that came on that pitched well. But they got to just get depth there. It's almost like you got to have 7 starters.
Yeah.
The way it is now. You know what I mean? It's crazy, right?
Yeah.
But you almost got to have like 7 starters and then feel really good about those 2 guys that don't start being your middle relief guys and getting a lot of cracks at it. And then when shit goes down, like now they can step in and start games. And so if it doesn't happen, then beautiful. But it seems to happen to 80-90% of all staffs as they go on, throughout the season. So I can talk a lot more about the Cubs than I can anything else. So
I know, but it's good stuff. And we're way past my due date, but I got to ask you because what with baseball and your attention to detail in basketball, what do you learn from I mean, you've been a
Oh
lifelong
yeah.
baseball
Like
guy.
I went
What,
to, yeah,
what
I
is
get
it?
20 games. I get 20 games. A friend of mine has season tickets. So I take 20 games off of him. And then I normally make about 25%. I went to like 6 games maybe this
Yeah.
year. Then I just take care of other people and that help us, or, just friends of mine that to give them tickets. But just, watching the game and,
I mean, yeah, how does it correlate to
just being a
basketball?
student of the game, just
Yeah.
understanding what's going on around you. I think
Yeah.
that's the most important piece. And that's kind of how I got to where I am. I look like I'm not like arguing with refs, or I look like I'm not that engaged at times. But I'm thinking, and I'm really just thinking about the next play. Like, don't let something get past you here. Like, know what's going on. If these 2 or 3 things happen, let's be prepared and let's know. And so, like, when I get emotional and I get into things, I sometimes can fall out of my frame. And so I don't allow myself to get emotional too many times. So you think it through. But when you go to a baseball game and they've made it more enjoyable because now it's not as long with the pitch count and everything. So you can get in, 2 to 3 hours, but just watching what's going on. There's so many things going on, defensively now. There's so many things going on from an offensive standpoint, like what they're trying to get accomplished. And, sometimes they're living for the, the home run or the rally, but sometimes they're just trying to manufacture a run. But it's fundamentals. It's communication. It's being on the same page. But it's also doing your work. You got to do your work. From batting practice to fielding practice to little things to watching film, like be a pro. And obviously those guys at that level are, but when we talked to our guys, I said, being a pro is, your secretary, or being a pro is a school teacher. The people that come early and stay late, and Coach Katie used to call him a company man.
Yeah.
Be a company man, learn to do what's best for the company. And it's so true. But you can learn a lot from other sports. If you got to pay attention, you got to know what's going on, first of all, but you got to pay attention.
Well said. Could continue this conversation for hours. We will not, I promise you, but thank you so much for your time, and always interesting. And we appreciate that very much. Good luck this season. Good luck with the rest of practice. And God, you've got media day in Minneapolis next week, and by the end of the month, you'll be in Fayetteville playing a game. So that's coming up fast. But thanks again so much, and we'll be back in a couple minutes for our next segment. Talk a little Purdue Iowa football, which I think Matt Painter could talk about as well. But we're going to spare.
No.
All right, sounds good. Thanks again.
Thank
Coach.
you. Thank you.